Okay, so I loaded up my Unreal launcher again, and you can see that there's the option to launch the Unreal Engine. You can see my version number there on the left, 4.13.2, but go ahead and launch the newest version available, because that's what we'll be working in. Loading up CGMA Vegetation 01, and now that that is loaded up, we're going to go down to our content browser, and you can see my level right there and our content on the right. So I need to open that up, CGMA Fushimi Inari 01, and you can see the rock placement that we had done before. Okay, so now go to your content, meshes, right click, and go to import to game, CGMA. Now find your Cypress large, go ahead and import that, it should all be okay. And you can see that popped up right there. Double click on it, and the scale looks way too small, of course. So we're probably gonna have to go back into Maya real quick, scale that down, and re-export it. So let's pop back to Maya. It's a good idea to leave it open at first, and let's just try in increments by 100. We'll see how that works. That's pretty big. I don't know about that. Maybe 10. Yeah. That'll work. Okay, I think that should be good. So I'm just trying to check it. I'm gonna export that, delete history, and then export, save over the old FBX file, and then go back to UDK. Okay, and now we can go back to the file, right click, and go to re-import. So that looks okay so far. I'm going to go ahead and try for that. I'm going to make a new material. Just duplicate that one. Double click. Okay, so now it's loaded up. So let's go to rename. Name it material generic. And I'm going to double click on that. I want to sort of differentiate the tone a little bit and delete the normal and AO map, which don't correlate with this thing anymore. This is just going to be a basic shade of color. So just save that out and apply. And I need to, well, I decided I'm going to change it a little bit. It's a little bit too bright still, too similar to the other ones, so I'm going to type in 0.7. That should work. Save that. So now go to my meshes, open up the tree, and with the material selected, we want to click on the arrow, and it will transfer a basic material to the tree, which later on we'll replace with a bark texture once we create that later on in the lesson. Or later on in the training. Okay, so now I gotta figure out where I want to place these things. If I recall correctly, there's a way to replace with a mesh, but I don't remember exactly how to do that. So I'm just gonna go ahead and place it manually. And I go ahead and save from the content all the way to the top of the content tree, just so that way if for whatever reason it crashes, we don't have to redo that. It's not that much work, but it's always good to just back it up anyway. So there's our tree. I'm going to mess with some scale and just start playing with rotations. You'll see a couple seams where the roots are at. We'll worry about that later on. So I'm just going to try nudging it into the space between these rocks here. I think that's working okay. And you hold Alt and drag, and you could just move these guys around, duplicate, try to find something that works. That's almost there, but I think I want to rotate it a little bit. See that little slightly curved root is going to work good on edges. I might emphasize that a bit on a few of these other roots as well, just so that I can use it in different ways. So I can have it kind of mostly vertical, but also give it a slight slant. It's okay if it penetrates a little bit, that's fine. We can always cover up any really egregious seams with plants and other things. and other rocks. This feels okay. Just trying to change the silhouette and scale and size. On my left monitor, I'm checking my reference. It's a lot of these really tall trees with these root formations coming out of rocks and embankments. Even if the trees feel a little bit sparse right now, that's okay because of the nature of the environment that we're creating. Feel free to make whatever environment you like based on your style guide and reference. If you have any questions, obviously I can answer those for you. For filling this scene out, once we create the canopies next week, that's going to do quite a bit. We're going to have these giant spires for trees, and then we're going to have a midground that's a little bit denser, and then a background. And here I'm just getting a top-down view, just checking the scene, and holding Alt to drag the trees out, kind of get a somewhat better scattering of them, different scales. Just kind of trying to see, let's say if I had a camera set up here, what sort of view would I get? I know most of this shot's probably going to also take place around some sort of a shrine or one of those little statues or a staircase. So I'm trying to figure out in my mind where I would put that, because I want to definitely see the view of the forest, but I also want to be able to focus on that. So, we could always go with multiple views. That's fine. Usually when we make a game environment and we're capturing those for our portfolios, obviously you just sort of get multiple views of your favorite shots from the player's perspective or whatever. And I think this is coming together pretty good. I like the way the rocks are flowing and the trees are feeling relatively natural. For a quick pass, it's not too bad. Keep in mind these trees will all be sort of iterated on as we move forward. And once we have textures on those, it'll look a lot better. Still trying to decide if we want to do just bark textures or bark with a moss slope, which slope's what we call a shader that has that basically will populate on the tops of things based on the angle. So we'll probably go over how to set that up for rocks at least and other things, let alone possibly trees if we have time. I'm noticing a slight hard edge on the trunk. So where it comes out of the roots there, it goes up a little bit and then straightens out. I'm not too sure if that's too harsh of a transition or if it feels good. It shouldn't steal any thunder from the player or the character. It shouldn't, unless of course that's called for in the scene. Like if it's a reveal or they just found this temple or this jungle thing, then that should be obviously more important should be placed on that. But this is just right now a base environment, so we'll have to try and find a way to make it really impressive, but not distractingly so. I know that sounds kind of weird to say, but what I'm talking about isn't some sort of a brag about how awesome the environment art is. It's more about your choice of colors and lighting and the way you lay out the scene for focal points. So you don't want it to incorrectly lead the player down a path that's not going to lead anywhere or waste their time, and you don't want to lead them the wrong direction either, because it's already a hard enough thing trying to figure things out. On the left here, if we make it dense enough, it's not going to be as inviting as, say, the character going this way. Let's say that was the main path on the right. On the left, you could have some sort of a hidden thing or whatever, maybe, but it's not that inviting. In the front, just like almost anything, the players will usually take the path of least resistance. So we try to, lead them that way, or at least encourage them. Because ultimately, unless it's a very directed, very linear story, it's supposed to at least imply the idea that the player has option or agency. So see here, I'm kind of filling that space because otherwise it's maybe too inviting. Now it almost kind of subtly leans to the left and thus turns the corner there. It sort of rounds out that edge a little bit. And here I decided maybe I didn't want that to be the focal point over there, so I'm starting to put in barriers. These are starting to appear like obstacles almost to the player. And to me, the thing I look at most is that rock that is pointing in that direction, but also that clearing there. These would almost look like stepstones, but because they're angled, it definitely detracts from it a little bit. And here I'm starting to add more of a barrier, just mainly for an artistic thing. And I just added like a small rock just to supplement the medium-sized tree, because it looks a little bit strange having just a large, like the giant rock and the tree sprouting out of it. You kind of almost want to put some smaller, medium-sized details to supplement that. And here I'm just pulling the rock out of itself because it probably will just be rock with a light peppering of leaves or dead leaves and loam. So I still don't want to make it look like the rock would be totally embedded in it. And here I'm just trying to think about how that rock would have settled. It probably would have landed on a planar surface. So obviously when you place these, unless it's landing in mud or some sort of sticky surface that would dry out and basically stick it in the angle that it landed, you want to sort of think about how these sit. Okay, and I'm just sort of nudging that around still. Pretty happy with that. I think that looks nice. Yeah, I think once I supplement that with a few supplementary root models that I'll be making, that'll actually look quite nice. I can just sort of have them crawling over the rocks there and then do like a tiling root texture. Here I'm just checking my reference. At this point I'm starting to think that the flat ground is starting to hold me back, so I'm just sort of checking to see what my style guide has in terms of like what I should do for the ground. So I'm just starting to think maybe a few little dips with like something like this where it comes down and then flattens out a bit in like a little valley. So I think I'm going to need to grab basically the mesh I've created in UDK and export that to bring into ZBrush so that I can use it as a reference for sculpting the ground. So I think, here we go, I think I'm going to grab all these meshes. Similar to other 3D programs, you just hold shift and click to add something to your selection, which is what I'm doing here with the rocks. So just go to File, Export Selection, and save it wherever you like.